What's up, Badger fans? Welcome to Locked On Badgers, your team every single day. The Badgers added another one in the portal. Let's talk about it. Let's talk about his fit in the receiver room on Wisconsin.
You are Locked On Badgers, your daily podcast on the Wisconsin Badgers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, Badger fans? Welcome to Locked On Badgers, your team every day. Doing a bunch of these just short kind of hit videos. When somebody commits, let's talk about it. Let's talk about the impact. Let's talk about the player. So this is a good one. Tyrell Henry visited Madison about a week ago. 6'1", 180-pound receiver coming out of Michigan. Played there for 2 years, so he's going to be coming in with 2 years of eligibility. He commits to the Wisconsin Badgers as they add to their receiver room. That means we got to fire the cannons.
Fire the recruiting cannons. Another one is headed to Madison on Wisconsin.
All right, let's talk about the player. Let's talk about Tyrell Henry. Again, 6 foot, about 180 pounds, kind of normal-sized receiver coming out of Michigan State. He was a decently recruited receiver coming out of high school. Last year for the Spartans, 24 catches, 195 yards, 3 touchdowns. Also has some special teams experience. When he committed, I reached out to a Michigan State guy, somebody who covers the team. This is what the Michigan State insider said about Henry's game, and I quote, "I'm a lot higher on him than most MSU fans are. I think he's a plus receiver in space after catching the ball, would be great on underneath or drag routes, but this staff didn't play to anyone's strengths last year. He was okay in the return game, but our special teams were a complete disaster, so it can't be all on him." The key part to take away from there is plus receiver in space. When you watch the film of him, he has that ability, right? He has some start and stop ability in space. He makes people miss. There's some, what I've always said about the portal and what I've always said about even recruiting is you do want to add variety to your positional groups, right? You want to bring in people who bring something unique to those groups. I think Henry gives you a little juice in this receiver room that isn't there right now. Right, when you look at the room, there's some big-bodied guys, the Greens, the Williams, the Chris Brooks, the Burrows, and then there's some slot guys that are like maybe the Tretch, the Pauling. There's not a lot of guys that potentially could be like Henry, where you use them kind of underneath and he can break a tackle or two, right, and get upfield. He has some electricity in space. I like that. I think he's a good complementary piece to this offense. He's not a star. He's not somebody that's going to come in, I don't think, and really elevate the room, but he's going to add to the depth of the room. I think he probably slots into your 2D pretty easily. Somebody with a couple years of experience, some special teams experience as well, but just kind of a unique athlete in space. I think that's what he brings. That it's a good get. They can't be done at receiver. Let's see. Zach Bart says he seems more athletic than the guys who departed, and I feel like he adds to the room. Yeah, I think that's it. Like, I think he adds a little dynamic ability to the receiver room. You need that. Now, again, I don't think they can be done at receiver. I still think they need a vertical threat. I don't think Henry is the vertical threat we've talked about needing to add. Unless they think that's going to come from internal development. Maybe they think that's going to be an Anthony or a Quincy Burrows. But if not, I think you still need to go out and get that guy. But in the meantime, I think Tyrell Henry makes your positional group deeper. I think it makes it better. I think it makes it a little more experienced, and it adds an athlete. To me, it's a good pickup. We talk a lot in the portal, or I have maybe. I do talk a lot. I talk a lot in the portal about not everything's a home run, right? You hit some singles, you hit some doubles. Some of the guys last year were singles and doubles. Joe Huber wasn't a home run, but he made the offensive line better because he played and he had a depth. Jason Maitre wasn't a home run, but he's probably a single or a double. And this feels like a double to me. This feels like a guy who's going to make the room better, but it's not going to move the needle dramatically when you play, I don't know, like the Alabama that we play in week 3 next year, for example. But I like him. Wes Molnick says, love you. Love you too, Wes. Thanks for joining the party as always. Caleb says, kicking some portal butt. Cheesehead Bucky says, yo. Wes says, Ryan, tell me that you love it. I just told you I love you. Robert Sorensen says, boom. Cheesehead Bucky, him and Snowden went to the same school. Snowden was doing a lot of recruiting on this one. Snowden's been doing a lot of recruiting on all of them, though. Amari Snowden is invested in making this team better. You love to see it. Bird Dogger says, one more receiver, then some defensive linemen. Yeah, like, again, the receiving group still isn't good enough. If y'all remember, let's go into the Wayback Machine, beginning of maybe like 3 weeks before this last season, when all of us, including myself, certainly thought this team would win 10 games, 11 games, 9 games as a floor, right? You remember those days? Those are fun times. I had Dane, I can't remember his name off the top of my head, but I had the draft analyst come on, and he talked about this receiver room. And what did he say? Now, he mispronounced DK's name, which got people fired up. But he said, this is a super average receiver room. When all of us were losing our minds, we're like, best receiver room ever at Wisconsin. We got some dudes, CJ Williams and Green. He was like, they're okay. But at another school, they wouldn't be, no, they're fine. They're just fine. They're okay. And I think that receiving group is still that. It's just fine. It's just okay. It still needs to be elevated. So I agree with Bird Dog. You need another receiver. But then, get like 5 defensive linemen. There are a bunch of offers out to defensive linemen. I think I'm going to do a show and just kind of do a defensive lineman transfer portal board. But there are a bunch of dudes on the defensive line they've offered. And of course they have. They know it's a need. Now, you remember one of the big deals in last year's transfer portal class, Darian Varner. What did he do this year? Like, you got to get some bodies, and it's got to be more than one, because you can't do another year on the defensive line like you had last year, because it's not good enough. Mehmet Pamaku, sorry, I apologize if I mispronounced last name, said I like to pick up. I do too. Caleb says we have some big needs coming in this weekend. There's some dudes, both receiver, a big guy from Wake Forest. There's some really good defensive linemen that played in ACC and SEC schools that are rotating through. I like it. Mehmet Pamaku, please tell me how to pronounce the last name so I don't butcher it. I really never intentionally try to. Said, I wish he was taller. I agree. But here's the thing. A guy like this, if he's taller, he's a different player. One of the things Kyle Shanahan talked about once, I was listening to a coaching kind of breakdown he did. And I was talking about receivers in particular. And I've always found this was an interesting little segment. He's like, the taller guys can't move like the little guys. And it sounds so obvious, but I never thought about it. Like, if this guy was 2 or 3 inches taller, he's probably his center of gravity is not quite as low, and he can't make those same moves in the open space, and he's a different player. Like, you need both, right? You need a taller vertical threat, but you also need a guy like this that you can throw that underneath route to. He can slip a tackle and get 17 yards. Also, really good ball skills. You look at some of Tyrell Henry's catches, some really good 50-50 catches. There's ability here. Again, this is a good pickup. It's a single or a double. You can win a lot of baseball games with singles and doubles. It's just not the home run, and that's okay. You get better by hitting singles and doubles. Easton Park says keep Vinny Anthony on returns. I agree. I was really impressed with Vinny Anthony this year in the snippets that we saw. Mitch James says we've got multiple guys that can run the jet sweep. Paul Chris would be having happy dreams over those guys. Matthew McLean says looks fast. I think he looks almost quicker than fast. I need to do some digging. I'll try to get his some of his 40 time and see if we can dig into him a little bit deeper. He does look fast, though. He looks like a good athlete. I think he raises the athleticism in that room, which is a big deal. Mogul Khan says, cool, this team will be 500 next year. It's possible. Like, listen, I kind of laugh internally when, again, we pick up guys in the portal, we're working to get better, and people are still really down on it. And Mogul might be right. This might be a 500 team next year. But the only way you're going to get above that is by continuing to pick up guys like this in the portal and get better. So this is a good thing. It's better than not getting receivers. And that schedule's brutal next year. Could be, I think I think they're going to be better than 500, but that's a brutal schedule. Mehmet says, thank you for all the great shows. Thank you for all the people listening. You guys are incredible. Tyler says, Ryan, how much receiver production needs to come from guys stepping up? I think a lot of it needs to come from guys stepping up. Look, Coach Fickell has talked about this. It's about internal development, and it's about plugging in transfers to patch holes. But you have a CJ Williams, who was a high 4-star receiver on the roster. You have Trechke Kahuna. You have Will Pauling. You have Quincy Burrows, who you brought over, right? You have Vinny Anthony and Chris Brooks, who you raved about. Like, you have to develop those guys. You can't go out and fill out the room in the portal. So I think the bulk of it has to come from internal development. You have guys with tools on the roster. I'm telling you right now, Quincy Burrows has tools. We know Trech has tools. Pauling had a great year last year. We know CJ Williams has tools. Like, those guys have to get better. And then you add in a piece or two to augment. But I think the majority of it has to come internally. If it doesn't come internally, then it's a failure on the staff, either recruiting and or developing. It's one of those two things, because most of this group now is Fickell Longo group, right? Trech. I mean, I guess maybe it's 50-50, but Trech, Bryson, CJ, Pauling, Quincy, Kyamberry Johnson, that's 6 right there. The leftovers, I shouldn't say leftovers, but the holdovers from the previous staff, Brooks, Vinny Anthony, Tommy McIntosh. Yeah, if you don't get more internal development, that's on this staff. They either misrecruited or underdeveloped. They don't have a receivers coach right now, which is interesting too. Matthew McLean says, feels like the 9-hitter in the receiver room. Will get you a nice play. I think he's better than that. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. I think he's got more juice than that. The Michigan State guy I talked to really likes him. Says this is a really good piece. He just wasn't used correctly at Michigan State. Again, if you watch some of the film, there's some really good ball control there. Pretty good in space. Bird Dogger says maybe 500 next year, but we will be a better team. Yeah, I think the team's better, but the schedule's a lot harder, right? So you can get better and the challenges are more difficult, and you could still be a 7-6 team, but you could be a 7-6 team and feel better about it, right? That is possible. It's like if you run 2 races, and the first race you're running against the 4th graders from Turtle Lake, Wisconsin, and you do okay because you're out of shape. You don't feel great about beating 4th graders, but the next race you train a little harder, you're a little bit better. Now you're racing against middle schoolers and you finish in the same spot. You feel a little better, right? Because you upped your competition. Let's see. Tom Nisa says, Ron Wolf always says, keep building the roster from the bottom up. Keep up the competition, build good depth. Good show as always, Ryan. Thank you, Tom. Always a good friend of the show. Love Tom. Got to meet him once. Great dude. Wes Mullenix says, bunch of D-line guys out of Georgia Tech are in the portal. Man, Florida State has lost a bunch. Georgia's lost a bunch. Bama's lost some defense linemen. Tech has lost some. There's bodies out there. Now you got to go land like 3 of them. I'm serious. Like, you got to land 2 or 3 defensive linemen. You have to. That position needs an overhauling. Kyle Matry says, I'm excited. Yeah. Comment on Klink says, this is a big weekend before signing day. Got to keep her own and got a few more on the board. Yeah. Speaking of signing day, we got a big interview tomorrow. I'm not sure if I want to go live or not with it. But yeah, we got a big interview tomorrow with a certain quarterback that I am stoked for. So if you're on the subtext, you've seen that, but yeah, be on the lookout for that one. I'm excited for that one. Speaking of that 24 class, you can probably put together the pieces. Robert Sorensen says, coddling Chris guys, time is over. The best will play and the others will sit. And that's what depth is all about, right? You bring in a guy like this. Let's use the baseball analogy. I've been going to those a lot lately. I don't know why, but let's say he's a number 4 starter, Tyrell Henry. You bring him in. Well, if you bring in a guy like that, that means your previous number 4 starter is now the 5th guy. Your 5th guy is now the 6th guy. It just lengthens your bench, lengthens your roster, right? And adding those depth guys in the middle is really important because it increases the depth. It increases the competition. It increases your resiliency to injury. Now, if you lose a couple receivers, maybe a guy like Tyrell Henry, you don't want him being your number 1 or number 2 guy, but that's a heck of a lot better than not having him and losing those guys to injury that are above him. So, listen, there's just no downside to adding good depth pieces and quality football players, right? The only potential downside is culture, chemistry, locker room. I think Luke Fickell can handle that. If you had more of a rookie coach or maybe someone who's had issues, like, I think he's got that, right? Now, maybe I'm wrong. If you think he doesn't, yeah, then that's a concern. But I'm not concerned with that. I'm really not. I think he's got that in-house. He knows what he's doing there. And if you trust him to manage the culture, bringing in more players is what you got to do in this level of football. There's just no questions about it. A bunch of questions here. Again, I don't want to do too long today. I really just kind of want to bang out some questions, but mostly talk about Tyrell Henry, right? I try to kind of do some type of reaction every time we get a guy because I think it's important. I think it's exciting. And again, I'm a fan. Like, this is fun to me. Like, I just get to come up here and talk Badgers with all y'all guys, and it means so much to me. So I really do appreciate everybody tuning in. Ryan, Tyler Strieber says, Ryan, who should we get for a receiver coach? Honestly, I don't know. I wish I haven't put a ton of brain power into this because I've been more invested in the portal, the basketball team, finishing up the 24 class. I have said who I want for a receiver coach has to be to me, the characteristics of that guy has to be dynamic recruiter and somebody who's a hungry coach, right? So I don't want as much of a older, I'm going to be in-house and develop the guys coach. I want a younger, I'm going to go get the talent type of a coach. That's what I want out of the receiver guy. I don't know who that is. Like, I don't have a receiving coach big board, but I'm interested in which direction they go there for sure. Let's see. Easton Park says Mabry. Yeah, we get barring something crazy, we got Mabry coming on, which I'm super excited for. That's going to be a fun interview. All right, I think I'm going to wrap it up there. The Perfect Spiral podcast, who is starting up a podcast, once he gets that going, let's go support that as well. He's a Badger fan. He says, hope we can land Willard Jr. That's the defensive lineman, the 24 kid. That would be an enormous get. Like, if you put 4-star defensive lineman. I think he's 270. Like, he carries the weight really well. That would be a disruptive front seven type of guy to add into the mix. Yeah, that would be good. And again, the problem is you need to add like 2 of those guys every cycle. If you really want to be serious about getting in the playoffs and winning a title, like if that's really the goal, you got to get like, that can't be like to us, landing a guy like Willer feels like a once in every 5 years recruit. And if we're going to be serious here, he needs to become like a 10 times in every 5 years recruit. That's hard. Like that's a really difficult for Wisconsin to do because they've never done that. But that's kind of what you got to do if you're going to be at the highest level. You need to land dudes like that and then stack dudes like that on top of dudes like that. You got to get the totem pole of recruiting, right, where it's all stacked on top of each other. It's the only way you're going to do it. Bo Dragon says he's starting a podcast. Let's go, Bo. It's called Long as a Fraud. Oh, stop it. Stop it, Bo. The Perfect Spower Podcast says, appreciate the mention, Ryan. Absolutely. I will be your first subscriber to the Bo Dragon Podcast, going back to the Bo Dragon Pod. I will be your first subscriber. I will love that show. Anyway, let's wrap it up there. 16 minutes. You guys are amazing. Thank you so much for allowing us to do this show, allowing me to do this show and being part of this journey. I think, again, it's all about the community. It's always been all about the community. It's only grown word of mouth. We don't ever ask for subs or likes or anything like that. So I can't tell you how much I appreciate it. On Wisconsin, look for a really good interview tomorrow. Again, I don't know if I'm going to go live or not, but I think we have Matt Toyer coming on. I think we also Monday have Heiberger. I think coming up after that, we'll have Raphael Dunn. So a bunch of guys coming up that I think are really going to be exciting to hear from. And we'll go from there. Again, signing day's coming up. Look for a ton of content around that. So on Wisconsin, appreciate everybody that's tuning in. Caleb says on Wisconsin. Commandant says thank you. Ryan Tyler says thank you. Mitch says thank you. You guys are awesome. Thank you guys. On Wisconsin, and we'll talk tomorrow.